It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Values, they continue to edge lower, with buyer confidence remaining cautious. Melbourne dwelling values remain below their previous peak, making it the only major capital city still working through this prolonged correction. In fact, one of Hawthorn's landmark heritage homes has just been relisted with a revised price guide. The listing highlights how even prestige vendors in Melbourne are adapting their pricing strategies to suit today's more measured Melbourne market. Do you think that part of the problem here is the obstacle of the property market in this cycle is that people are overanalyzing the market? What do you think?
Yeah, human nature is we always want to get it right. We want to assess every risk. We want to make sure that we make the most amount of money. But by the time we do that, the opportunity passes us by. So, it's a scary decision to buy real estate. I'm not saying it's easy for 1 second, but undoubtedly, based on the statistics that you've just given everyone before about where Melbourne's at, if you want to buy, arguably there's less competition than ever before. So get yourself into a position, find the house or the property that you're looking to invest in, and just go and make an offer and buy it.
Yeah, I was talking last week to Veronica Morgan, and she raised a really interesting point. In softer markets, when people should be buying, for whatever reason, they say, oh no, I'm not going to buy right now. I'm just going to wait for the price to come down even further.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago, Craig, that we were saying, or we were hearing the market or people saying, I can't buy a home because it's too competitive. The argument was there's too much competition. Now when there's very little competition, the same people are arguing, I'm not going to buy yet. I think it's going to get cheaper. Well, if you keep playing that game, you're still going to be upset, and 10 or 20 years will pass you by and you still haven't bought something.
Yeah, we sort of raised this, people, when is the bottom of the market? Nobody knows when the bottom of the market is, but people think they do know. Some people are so convinced they know when the bottom of the market is, they even give you the month. But this is really fanciful thinking. And I'll even quote you from the line in the movie The Castle, you're dreaming, mate. So, Paul, there's a lot of dreamers out there.
There's nothing wrong with dreaming and there's nothing wrong with having a vision, but I just think largely most people are buying real estate to call it home. Like the castle, people are buying their castles. So whether you buy right at the bottom or just before it or just after it, your castle is, in most cases, your forever home. So who cares whether you miss it by a few thousand, $10,000 or $20,000 over the long run? History has always suggested to us that you'll make it back. And, even if you make a little bit, it's the memories and the enjoyment of being in that house that far outweighs the dollar value.
Let's go to your number one tip for buyers traversing through this current property market cycle in Melbourne. What would you suggest for buyers right now?
The caveat is if you're ready to go, finance ready, and you want to buy, my number one tip is act. Don't wait. Go to auction, bid, put yourself in the position to negotiate, or if it's for sale, make an offer, sign a contract and put it in the agent's hands or under the vendor's nose, because no one's on the market right now to sort of value their property. They're out there to sell. So go out there and actually act.
And what about your number one tip for vendors?
My number one tip for vendors is if you've got one bird in the hand, I don't see where the second one's coming from at the moment. Time may necessarily not work in your favour, so give due consideration to something that is sitting in front of you. I'm not saying to take the first offer, but I'm certainly saying give it due consideration, because we don't have the luxury of having a second or a third person sitting behind it at the moment.
And you've got one of the biggest female brokerages in Australia.
Yeah, we do actually. Surprisingly, we've got a huge amount of women that work for us, but we do actually have 2 boys now, which is lovely to have. So we're trying to even the scales a little bit. But a lot of women in this role, obviously dealing with finance and dealing with people's very big time in their life when they're purchasing property. It can be quite intimidating, and we just love to guide people through the process. So I don't know. We seem to attract women in our office, I think, more than anything.
And there's a little bit of a misconception around guarantors these days. Perhaps explain to those listeners what a guarantor is and the different types and what misconceptions are out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people aren't or can't get part of that first scheme spots, guarantors could be another option where we always talk about the children and the adults generally. That's the way it would work. But the children would use a parent, and it generally needs to be a parent, but a lot of banks are different. Some will take a sibling or an uncle or an auntie or a step parent. But basically with a guarantor, it's generally the children that are asking access to a parent's property. And we sort of describe it like they're grabbing a bedroom of the parent's home and holding on to that as security. So it's generally a limited amount. It's only limited to whatever the kids need to keep their property under 80%. So with that, the guarantors generally need to seek legal advice with most banks. Not all banks offer a guarantor loan though, so some specialise in it and are better than others. Really what happens is the kids' bank will grab a bedroom of the parents' property and hold that as security until the kids have enough equity in their home to actually release the parents' property. And a lot of times, obviously, guarantors won't do it if they don't trust their kids to actually be able to pay down some debt or increase the value of the property as well with renovations.
Lenders mortgage insurance. This is a big handbrake for a lot of people, Sarah, scraping up on their deposits. Let people know why they need it, and I guess, is it worth it?
Yeah, great question. So with lender's mortgage insurance, it's actually a bank insurance, and it covers the bank if the borrowers default on their mortgage and they cannot recoup the property or the price that is outstanding on the mortgage. If they can't recoup that back, then the lender's mortgage insurance will actually cover that to the bank. So really, it's a bank insurance for themselves. It doesn't cover a client for their own home loan. There's good and bad, obviously, with LMI, we call it. It's a necessary fee sometimes if you're borrowing over 80%. And sometimes it can be better paying lender's mortgage insurance now to get the property, sooner than having to save another $30,000. But by the time you do that, the property might have gone up by 100. If the mortgage insurance costs you $5,000, but you can get it now and not have to wait to save for further amount, and obviously the delay in time, I think it can sometimes be a really good option.
We should talk about why people go back and forth with the question about engaging a mortgage broker in the first place. So when do you think is the best time to see a broker, and how important is it for people financing up their loan to do that through a broker?
Seeing a broker at the start of your journey can definitely help because they're going to put you in the right stage from the very start of where you need to be in the education piece as well. Also, having access to over 60 different lenders, which we have at Loan Market, means that we can go to so many different banks to be able to assist a client and find the best deal for them. With lenders as well, as we were talking before about the government schemes, if you walk into particular branches, they actually may not even be part of that scheme or on the panel for that. So we can save people a lot of time and a lot of money. And yeah, you reach out to a broker at any time, refinancing, upgrading, downsizing, any of those.
Hey, got a great head-to-head here, Brisbane versus Perth. So first off, let's have a look at the Brisbane suburb of Paddington. Median house price $2.3 and change million. Median unit price just over $1 million. The 12-month house growth 17.2%. The 12-month unit growth, gee, look at that, 22.3%. House rental yield 2.6%. And the unit rental yield 3.5%. Right, let's have a look in the Perth suburb of Scarborough. The median house price there, $1.472 million. The median unit price, $843,000. The 12-month house growth, 13.3%. 12-month unit growth, 13.7%. And in Scarborough in WA, the house rental yield is at 3.5% and the unit rental yield at 4.5%.
Let's fuel your passion for property together. Join us, along with our industry experts, to help inspire and inform your next real estate decision.
As I said, Cotality is reporting Brisbane has recorded that back-to-back fall. What does that mean for somebody like Alex there on the Gold Coast? Do you look at Brisbane and rub your hands together and say, okay, yeah, bring it on?
Look, we do. I mean, the Gold Coast still has high demand for migrants coming in interstate, and even locals moving in from further afield coming into town. So even Brisbaneites looking to work the city of Brisbane, but live the lifestyle of the Gold Coast. And you said lifestyle at the beginning. You can't replace the Gold Coast lifestyle, not by a long shot.
What is that sort of buyer inquiry like at the moment, from people in Brisbane saying, well, yep, let's look at the Gold Coast, let's get that lifestyle happening?
Absolutely. It's very strong at the moment. We have more local and Queensland buyer inquiries than we do interstate at the moment. I think a lot of that is just to do with negative sentiment interstate, whereas Brisbaneites and locals here, fairly buoyant. We don't have the misery of the weather down south. We have some great weather here and it's getting people out and about.
Yeah, it seems a sort of a similar picture with Melbourne. Like Melbourne has sort of dried up with that interstate buying, similar to what you've just said, but regionally it still seems to be pretty popular. In fact, buyer competition, it has eased compared to the frenzy on the Gold Coast of recent years, and it is creating better opportunities to negotiate. But with sellers, they seem to be holding firm. It's a story around the country at the moment. The window is open, for business for buyers, but it may not stay open for, much longer if demand starts building again.
Well, you have to remember on the Gold Coast during COVID, we had a lot of interstate cash come up. So there were more buyers who were cash buyers without mortgage, more retirees, more people coming back from overseas, expats retiring back to the coast, selling up overseas and bringing their cash here. So one of the strong factors we have on the coast is the low level of mortgages against every property. Whereas cast your mind back, say, 10 years ago, and we were one of the mortgage default centres of Australia, and that's all changed. That whole demographic has changed. So there's no real underlying pressure on the market en masse. That's not to say individual pressure isn't there here and there, but that individual pressure isn't translating into massive discounts like the GFC or anything like that.
Something that has just sort of gone through my mind as I'm talking to you, we do a lot of reporting on Dubai, the UAE, and what is happening there because so many Aussie investors are in that market with portfolios, and then you've got people leaving Australia to pick up on that lifestyle. You compare Dubai to the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast in a lot of ways is a mini Dubai. I just wonder, as a result of the Iranian conflict, have those international inquiries sort of been diverted? Are you picking up some of that traffic that would have been looking at Dubai?
I think we are, but I don't think it's international traffic that we're seeing here. I think what we're seeing is traffic that would have left the country instead of just leaving the country as an exodus, staying here instead. And talking about Dubai, there are some really heavy hitters in town at the moment from Dubai looking at commercial sites for massive unit complexes. And additionally, I spoke to one of the well-known mining families yesterday, and they were saying that the Dubai government is now considering free schooling to lure back the expats during the Iranian conflict. And he didn't think that was going to have the effect because wealthy people just can pay for their own schooling. So why go into a conflict zone if there's danger? He was picking the Gold Coast to be another hotspot because the conflict is just going to drive the expats away from there.
Ready to take your real estate knowledge to the next level? So are we.
Yeah, one of the talking points from Melbourne in particular is the trend of a lot of homeowners just deciding not to sell. They're looking at that price point and they're saying, no, I can afford to just sit and wait rather than accepting that lower price. They're waiting for market conditions to improve, which means fewer properties are coming onto the market, creating a different type of supply challenge across Melbourne. How much of that are you seeing?
Granted, it's winter, and every time this year, the supply is quite low, but vendors, sellers are definitely now sort of holding off and sort of waiting until maybe spring, and let's see what happens in spring. What we are finding, though, within our business is that there are quite a few sellers who are potentially looking at or liking the opportunity of selling off market, hoping that they can get someone that come across and probably pay close to what they would like to sort of see, irrespective of where the market sits. But I'm expecting spring to have an uplift based on the conversation conversations we've been having with a lot of real estate agents and where their stockpile sits at the moment.
You say off-market, though wouldn't in this particular market, wouldn't that make it really hard to sell off-market? Because, as I always say, it's not mass market. You've got a much smaller clientele. That'd be pretty challenging, wouldn't it?
To some extent, we are purchasing 1 in 2 at the moment off markets. So 1 in every 2 properties that we look at are purchased off markets. The sellers are saving quite a lot of money from the marketing aspect, time, efficiency, not needing to style the property and what have you. Now, in saying that, there are some that we always sort of say when you try to sell a property, you're not selling a secret. But because of the situation of the current circumstances where the market sits, I think the RBA are coming out next week to tell us what they're doing with their interest rates. This is where some of the sellers are like, okay, I do need to sell for whatever reason, and we'll look at that option.
Yes, and while Melbourne has softened, regional Victoria is telling this completely different story. Many regional towns are still recording annual price growth, largely because housing supply is remaining tight. It does highlight just how different property markets can perform even within the same state at the same time.
That's totally right. And we're finding that obviously with lifestyle and changes, and if we go back to the pandemic, when everybody wanted to sort of move out and what have you, we're still finding that a lot of people are wanting to move further out away from the hustle and bustle, hence more buyer activity. But at the same time, and with all due respect to regional buyers, that does fluctuate more than it does within inner Melbourne when the market does sort of change. So you can have a good increase, but at the same time, you can have quite a severe drop.
Are you looking forward to the RBA meeting, which is coming up very soon? Some of the market indicators would suggest there won't be any movement, but there are some possibility that, it's the RBA. Anything could happen.
Yes, no, definitely looking forward to that. Would love to sort of say that there won't be another increase, and my inkling tells me that there might not be, but it's the RBA, as you said, and we all just wait and see what happens on the day.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.